Hi, I'm following along with Paul McWhorter's Fusion 360 3D printing lessons. And the homework for this week was uh, creating something that looked like this in Fusion and then trying to print it out. That was a tall order, I thought. Um, but I said, well, I think I can give it my best shot and see how it works out. So let's get to Fusion and see how I did it. All right, so as Paul mentioned, you take two gears, a 12 and a 24 tooth, to give you a 2-to-1 ratio, and you make them coincident with each other and combine them using the combine thing. So I knew that there was no way that 3D printed shafts were going to work at all on this, as far as if you were going to go in the speed up direction. It sounded like I thought from his video that he said, well, it's a speed multiplier, which means that you're going to crank a gear slow and you're going to get one to go really fast. At some point, your friction's going to overcome whatever you can do for that. But I said, okay, to give it the best shot, I decided to use 1/4 inch ground rod that is nice and smooth and on size. And I actually printed the holes in these just a little tighter than I normally do. And then I used 3 perimeters on everything. And that way it gave me enough meat in there, enough plastic to, and then I used a drill to ream them out a little bit to get them to be smooth running on the ground shafts. I also said, well, they're going to be stacked on top of each other. So I just designed it all as one piece, but this thing here is a washer that I was going to put in between them, just a 1/4 inch washer, just to give a spacer and avoid the plastic on plastic contact. So that's what I did for that. So I made 2 of them and placed 2 of the and placed them there. I said, well, I guess I better figure out how to get a base on here for them. So I got a base with a little riser here so it would catch the one, and everything. So we got that done. I said, well, okay, let's just make some more, copy and move them some more. So we got 4 there, and then let's see, 5 and 6. That's the 6 of them. And I said, okay, so how are we going to drive these? So I thought, okay, because like I say, I'm gonna have 1/4 inch rod up here. So I came up with that's not the gear. So okay, I changed the 24 point gear to be part of it. So, and that one has just a hollow 1/4 inch up through it. My intention was to use a square shaft to drive a crank. So that was my thinking. Um, I knew that with all these gears stacked up, even with just the metal rod in between them, uh, with all that pressure and friction, they were going to want to spread apart. So I thought about doing this, where this would connect with that rod to hold them in place. But I didn't have any way of doing. I didn't have any bushings or anything that would work for that, or bearings. I think a bearing might have helped in this place, but I didn't have any. That's any in the reasonable size to use there. So I thought that would help out a little bit. And then we had the crank. Had the crank on it. So, and then, like I said, you spin that. But if you look at it, so far we've got 2 times gear, and let's make it so you can see it. So you got This is your 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. So you got a 64 to 1 rate increase. So each turn of this crank, it's going to turn this one 64 RP revolutions. And here's where I made my mistake. I said, oh, okay. I had tried out, I had actually printed out a couple of these and saw how smooth they ran on the thing. I said, let me go ahead and change that up a little bit. And I redesigned this thing and added this extra space down here. And I put another spur gear down there. And so we got another spur gear. Okay. So here's how we're going to make it really neat. We're going to make it a silly cat video. And I found this cat on the internet, and you can insert a mesh into Fusion 360. That's where things went wrong. Paul doesn't like cats. I should have never did a silly cat video or tried to do one. So anyhow, come to find out, you cannot. So I would have needed to have these two combined to print all at once. And you cannot take a solid body and combine it with a mesh, evidently. I tried for an hour and I couldn't figure it out. I said, okay, let me go to the internet. And they said, oh, okay, everybody should be using Mesh Mixer, which is an Autodesk product as well. And that was about a 2-year-old post or video or something that I watched that said to do that. And then I went to the Mesh Mixer site and they said, most of the Mesh Mixer features are now in Fusion 360. And they had a list of things how to do it. And I didn't even realize, but we actually do have a mesh feature up here. And I played with it for a while and I still couldn't get it to combine. And then I did a little bit more research, and what you end up having to do, you can't combine a mesh with a solid in a workspace. Even though I turned this into a solid, you can supposedly turn it into a solid, but it's not really a solid, or at least the 2 or 3 ways I tried to do it, they're not a solid. It's just a fake solid. But you can, so I exported this small gear as a STL. And once I had that as a mesh, then I could go to the mesh section here, and you can actually bring both of them in and bring them down. And then you do have a combine, where you can combine the 2 meshes together. And then I just exported that to my slicer. That worked out well, but I don't know if you can see it, but I like to print fast. I had a lot of printing to do. And let's see if I can take this out of stop share. So if you can see this, the top of the cat just got mangled. I was trying to do it at 0.2 millimeter layer height and kind of fast, and you have to slow way down and probably go to 1 millimeter to get it to print out right. So that didn't work out well. So that's what I ended up having to do. So that didn't work out at all. So that should have told me, leave this thing alone. But I didn't. So let's go back over to our gear train here. Okay, so that's what we got going on. And again, I tried my best to try to get these things, the joints and the motion links all together on these. But once you could get 2 to go, we're getting this third one that was collinear with these. There must be a trick that I don't know, because I couldn't get the third one to do it. So, I mean, I actually separated them and everything and tried doing it, but just as soon as you tried to get a third link going, getting a combined thing, couldn't get it done. Maybe Paul will show us how if he was able to, but just couldn't get it done. So it's not an animated thing. So all right. So that's the end of the fusion. So let's show you what we got for 3D printing. So here's my base with a riser on it and just 2 gears. And you can see they run for minutes. I mean, they just slide so nice and easy on there. I was happy. I said, man, this is going to work. So let's see. I think I went with the weight gear next. They're all the same. I just want to have it color coordinated. So I got 3 gears. Oh, they're still going nice and smooth. And like I say, there's a washer on top of each of the gears. Got the white one. Now we're going back to green. Okay. So now we got what, 1, 2, 3 reductions. So this is like a 2, 4, 8 to 1, right? 8 to 1. So every time this top gear goes around, the bottom green gear is going to go 8 times. Okay, we're still in business. Let's go and put another black gear on here. And now we're to 16 to 1. Oh, it's getting a little harder. Getting a little harder. But now we're getting 16 for every spin. All right, we got one last gear to get the 6 gears on. It says 32 to 1. Okay, it's just barely going, just barely going. But if you remember from my drawing, I had one more gear to put on, and this would make it 64 to 1. And this was the one with the crank, but I'm not even going to put the crank on because if you notice, it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't go anywhere. So I had this piece that I was going to put in between them, and it seemed to be all right. Oh, kind of just snaps on. Let me get it on, then I'll bring it back. There we go. So that was going to help hold them together to keep them from separating. But like I said, this is plastic to plastic here. And I think that's what did me in. And holding it together is just too much. So anyhow, that didn't work. So I thought, how can I use my crank? So my shaft was just the right height on here. I took the last double gear off and just putting a single gear on. And it just barely fits in there. But now I can say I got my crank, and I didn't mention it, but I have a Prusa printer and I have the Prusa slicer, and I really never used this feature before, but I said, man, there's going to be a lot of pressure on this crank where the knob meets the handle. And I had remembered seeing that there was like where you can take certain layers and change the infill or change the whatever the layer height, but the infill was the thing that I wanted to change. So for 10 millimeters on either side of this layer here, so 5 on each, 5 layers on one before you get to it and 5 layers after you get to it. It's 100% infill, and it really does make a nice strong thing. I tried my best to break it after I found out that this wasn't working so well, so and couldn't do it. But anyhow, so you can see that we can just barely get a crank going on here. And if I can get my fingers out of the way, well, we can get a good bit of 64 RPM. Well, 64 to 1, so I'm probably going 6 RPMs. That bottom green gear is probably going 6 times 64. I don't know what that is. So anyhow, that's my video for today. Thanks for watching and looking forward to more of Paul's videos. Bye.